Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrop.
Exciting visions from Puerto Rico, where not only is corruption bringing down the governor, but homophobia.
Well, that did sort of kick things off.
I have never heard the word so much on television.
Well, how about North Carolina, where the anti-transgender law looks like it's going down?
Some gay American parents are suing our State Department to recognize the U.S. citizenship of their child.
Well, if they win that fight, I hope they don't try to send their child to the Christian daycare center that won't care for the child of lesbian parents.
We told you about that mayor who refused to raise the rainbow flag. Well, he's reversed himself, and we're going to tell you why.
Andy thinks it's a cute story.
Oh, I was very moved by it, just as the mayor was.
You're a pushover.
I am.
We're going to mourn the passing of gay pioneers in Atlanta and Orlando and tell you about another trans woman murdered, this time in North Charleston, South Carolina.
Oliver Stone, what a guy.
Oh, my God.
Told Mr. Putin that Russia's anti-LGBT law was sensible.
And he had other things to say, too. Meanwhile, a lesbian activist in St. Petersburg, Russia, was murdered after being listed on an anti-LGBT website. It's a kill list.
Yeah. In South Korea, pro-LGBT students won a court case challenging them being disciplined by their Presbyterian university.
Ah, religion. A force for good in the world.
Yeah.
And the Kennedy Center honors for this year have been announced, we hope without the attendance of the president.
No.
But the honorees include a PFLAG mom, who will be familiar to you, and an out gay conductor.
And what a week to be an American, with the president's words, send her back ringing in our ears. What a week. I mean, I love what Megan Rapinoe said.
I love everything she says, but one in particular.
She was giving an interview on the Van Jones show, and she said, look, it's disgusting. She said, it's sad and it's despicable. I think we're one step away from just saying a racial slur on national television from the President of the United States. At every stage, it's shocking. I hope people don't stop being shocked by it all, because it is truly the worst of the worst. I mean, we can just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, that's him. What, are you kidding? It's awful, and it has to be commented on.
Well, I think we've heard many racist slurs from him. My concern is that people talk about him dividing the country. I really am concerned that we're divided into the haters and the more progressive people.
Lovers.
Maybe lovers. But here we have Boris Johnson this week. We still have Trump. We still have Bolsonaro in Brazil. We have Orban in Hungary. We have Putin in Russia. I worry that the human race is giving up.
Well, I mean, you have long said that we are a failed species.
Exactly. And I tend to believe that. I said it, why wouldn't I? But, although I don't believe everything I say. But I really worry that faced with climate change, which we're now being told is going to end life as we know it in the foreseeable future, and everything else going on in the world, that people have just given up.
As I like to say, it was nice while it lasted, sometimes. But we do go on, and people are still fighting. I mean,
the people of Puerto Rico have not given up.
Yes, this is obviously one of the biggest stories of the year. And as I said, every reporter gets on the air, gets down there, and says, because of corruption and homophobia and sexism, homophobia keeps getting said because he was so blatant about it, which is why, show that picture, we had Ricky Martin in the demonstration of 500,000 people. 500,000 people in Puerto Rico is the equivalent of 50 million being on the streets of America. But Ricky Martin is there. Actually, you can't see it there, but his rainbow flag was backed up by a Puerto Rican flag, and there he was. So it's Ricky versus Ricky against Governor Rosselló down there, who by the time you've seen this should have resigned.
Well, we're taping as usual on Wednesday afternoon, so right at this moment, Rosselló has not resigned, but as we predicted last week, we think that's only moments away because it's growing, because the people are demanding it, and that is the lesson for me out of this, and the lesson we learn continually through our lives, that when you can put a critical mass of people in the street who are demanding something and not stopping, the government has to respond.
I mean, the people of Puerto Rico have been in dire straits because of the hurricane, because of the corruption that is starving them in their public services and things. I mean, I guess you can say we haven't reached that stage here yet. So
what, of this country? Well, parts of this country have, but people are not fighting back in those ways.
Congratulations to the people of Puerto Rico. And so we are, in this country, fighting our own State Department.
Yes.
First of all, we're going to talk about two stories relative to the state. One is the opposition to that Human Rights Council which is stacked with religious bigots.
To even call it a Human Rights Council is ridiculous.
But 178 advocacy groups signed a letter against it, including ours, HRC and Outright International, Amnesty, PFLAG.
This is what's so annoying, that they keep coming up with these things to keep us busy signing letters.
100 Catholic leaders signed a letter against it.
We have better things to do. But Pompeo, evidently Christ's representative at the State Department, has put together this nonsense about supporting human rights by discriminating against everyone, and so we have to fight back.
We do.
This is why we have to get rid of these monsters.
And so the other story is about the kid.
A married gay couple, two men got married, and they arranged for a surrogate in England. There they are, and there is their baby girl.
Yep.
And a surrogate in England gave birth to their child. One of them is the biological father of the child. So they apply for the child to get papers as an American citizen, because she is, after all, their child, and they are both Americans. There's no muddy waters here of one from someplace and one from someplace else.
And if a heterosexual married couple brings a child back, there is just a presumption that it is their child.
But with this couple and the Pompeo State Department, this girl is considered the child born out of wedlock.
Yeah.
The men are married, but because only one of them is provably biologically related to the child, suddenly their marriage disappears and their parenting of the child, and both their names are on the birth certificate, by the way, in England. But the State Department will not recognize them as a married couple and the child as the child of both of them, and therefore she's being denied U.S. citizenship.
Being put through a much more, quote-unquote, rigorous process of verification.
Well, so far denied.
Yes.
They may or may not get through that process.
The indignity of this. When you're not gay, you don't have to put up with this.
Well, the Obergefell,
you were right the first time.
No. Obergefell is supposed to take care of all this by making everybody equally married, but not in the eyes of the government that wants to discriminate against you. So now this is another battle we have to fight that we shouldn't have to fight.
Well, we have a little less to fight in North Carolina. A federal judge essentially did a settlement with the parties. You know, when they had this horrible HB 2, which banned us from all transgender people from using facilities in consonance with their gender identity, that caused a big uproar, and they passed a somewhat softer version of it.
Well, they got boycotted by a lot of companies, and the NBA wouldn't play games there, and it was a big stink.
So there's been a 3-year legal challenge to this by civil rights groups, and finally they agreed, okay, transgender people can use whatever facilities that are appropriate for them.
State-owned facilities.
Yes.
This only covers state-owned facilities, but yes, this compromise has been signed. Now, there's another part of the law that says local towns and cities cannot pass non-discrimination ordinances that go beyond what the state has.
This is something that they did in Arkansas and in Tennessee.
Yes.
Anywhere else? We don't think so.
I'm not keeping this list.
Okay.
Our viewers can bring us up to date on that. But this is the other part of the law, and that has not been dealt with yet because the court says they're going to wait to see what the Supreme Court of the United States does with the non-discrimination cases before it that are going to decide whether or not laws against sex discrimination also cover sexual orientation and gender identity.
The High Court of the United States is going to hear those cases, 3 cases, 2 gay cases and a transgender case in October. It's going to be in their first week. And, well, of course, the reason they say they're doing it early is because they're probably going to argue so much about how to resolve it. They may not end up having a decision until June of 2020.
I think they'll decide it much more quickly, and they'll decide against us.
Oh. You're giving in. Well, there's good conservative arguments for this, and there's plenty of precedent on this.
There are good conservative arguments against any kind of non-discrimination laws. So why would you think they would suddenly wrap us into these?
As I've said, because even Antonin Scalia,
he's dead.
And a hero to many of these people, talked about the way if you engage in sex stereotyping, that is a violation of the law banning discrimination on the basis of sex.
That was one case. It was a narrow part of the law.
All
right. We may have to have another bet on this.
I'm more hoping than betting, but I could bet $1.
Okay,
we allowed to do that on this program?
Well, we've done it before, so why not? I bet we go down big.
I think the transgender cases are easier lifts for the court than the gay cases.
Always have been.
Yeah.
So if they split, we're a wash. But
okay, is that the deal?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
I define the terms of the bet.
All right.
I want to go back to the federal government for a minute,
Sure.
though. We really one of the most heartbreaking, nauseating, disgusting, dispiriting things going on in this country.
Don't hold back.
Yes, is the detention of migrants seeking asylum or just entry into this country and the separation of families. And some of the people in custody as migrants seeking asylum are trans people. 29 trans and non-binary migrants who are being held in custody over the border. These are not criminals. Often the excuse by the government is
persecuted people.
Yes, exactly. So they wrote a public letter saying they're receiving no medical care for those who are HIV positive or disabled. They're being abused and raped by guards. And there's a result in the Roxana Hernandez autopsy. She was the one who died in custody at the border. Turns out she died of blunt force trauma to her head, deep tissue damage, and handcuff injuries.
Will anyone pay for this? Are they investigating?
Look, we can't even prosecute someone who kills a guy who's selling cigarettes in Staten Island. Right. People in charge don't get prosecuted or convicted very often.
Horrendous. Yeah. Which is why we need better legislatures in this country. And, we've told you about the Zero for Zeros campaign. And a little bit more about that. This is about, you're a corporation, you have good policies, you get 100% rating from the Human Rights Campaign.
Good LGBT policies.
For your employees, basically.
Yeah.
And people will add, and some of these corporations, they're the ones who helped us in North Carolina and Indiana when we were trying to get rid of these bad laws.
It's true.
However, just as an example, these same corporations that get 100% ratings, like Google and American Airlines and Microsoft and Amazon, they're giving to Ted Cruz. They're giving to Louis Gohmert. Did you see Louis Gohmert, talking to Mueller this week? He's a complete horror show.
Steve King of Iowa.
They give to these people, and they then say, well, and they all issued statements. We love gays, but we make our donations to help our businesses. How is that helping your gay employees not to have civil rights, which is what the end result of supporting all these bigots is?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that this new campaign did get statements from these corporations. They replied, but they really stood up for their need to donate to right-wing politicians who will diminish their regulatory demands.
Maybe if they heard from the Human Rights Campaign that you will not get a 100% score.
Well, that's
if
the
money
issue.
is going to opponents of basic. They could pick at least, you don't have to be every single thing on our agenda, but at least the Equality Act.
Well, they could certainly add to their scoring thing the fact of donations to right-wing politicians. If you give to a politician who has a 0% HRC score, that should count against you in your HRC score. But this is a long-standing problem with HRC. You may remember that they did not score politicians on their votes for the Defense of Marriage Act because that would have taken too many points away from too many politicians.
Well,
and they want to put out...
We wouldn't have had any friends anymore. They're our friends. See,
they want to put out a positive list. They don't want to put out lists that are negative, that hold politicians to account.
And this is a very important reminder for folks because, some folks have said to us, oh, why did you talk about marriage so much? The big groups did not want to talk about marriage when it came up as an issue. It was done by the grassroots.
Yes.
And they were late to the fair.
Well, and here you have a bunch of House Republicans who are now calling on Amazon to go back to selling Joseph Nicolosi's book on conversion therapy, which Amazon had the guts to take off its sales pages, led by Vicky Hartzler, the representative from Missouri, who brought you the trans ban in the military.
Now, hold on. I mean, on this whole thing,
yes.
Amazon is a marketplace. I mean, it's just transmitting things. Do we want censorship from these groups? I mean, don't forget,
question.
Lots of people didn't want to carry gay books or
Sure, and Amazon
the Bible is full of a lot of hate too.
And Amazon sells books by Hitler.
Yes. Well,
calling them historical records.
The person,
but Nicolosi, I'm not arguing against you. I tend to agree with you. But the thinking is that Nicolosi is a real lying monster.
He's dead.
Well, he was a lying monster. Maybe that's the Hitler analogy, but they're both dead. But the Republicans, the right-wing Republicans, are the ones behind.
I know.
Sell Nicolosi's
in general,
book.
I mean, by the way, the person who
who
brought Mein Kampf to the United States, who wanted it published here, was former Senator Alan Cranston when he was young. He said he wanted Americans to see what this horrible book was, so that they knew what we were fighting.
Well, if you want another reason to go after corporations, Facebook and Google and others are tracking your activity on gay porn sites. They are following you on the internets.
Oh. Now, speaking of censorship, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, he was interviewed on a country music station, Cumulus Media, and in Nashville, and they spiked the interview because they didn't want this going out there. And some people said, well,
What do you mean? They
wouldn't
booked
run it.
him, they interviewed him, and then they wouldn't run it?
They didn't run it. This guy does a show there. He was allowed to put the thing on the internet, but there's no fairness doctrine for him. But they censored it. They didn't want it on the station.
What did they think they were getting?
Well, again, this is a guy who tapes shows for them, gives them the show, and then they said they're not going to do the show.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I
want to hear your favorite story about the mayor in Pennsylvania, Reading, Pennsylvania, who canceled the flying of the rainbow flag for Pride and has now changed his mind.
That was Mayor Wally Scott. Who thought, oh, the rainbow flag is political, I'm not putting that up there, I don't care what the city council says, I'm not putting it up there. And then he said he was moved by and all he would say is a prominent woman's story, coming out story. She said, when I told my mom that I was gay, I said, this is the lesbian saying this to her mother, God must have made a mistake. And the mother said, your mother loves you. You're not a mistake. I'll stand up for you wherever you go. And the mayor said he was overcome with emotion, and he raised the rainbow flag right then and there. Well, I think that's a great story.
If they were still doing movies of the week, that would be one of them.
That's a great story. All right.
Well, I'm a little more interested in the mayor of Holyoke, Mass, Alex Morse, 30 years old. He was elected mayor of Holyoke when he was 22. Now,
he knocked on 95% of the doors in the town.
Well,
literally.
I've driven through Holyoke many, many times. And
so there he is on the left.
Yes.
And he's running for Congress against, now you may not know this guy on the right, that's Richie Neal, the Democratic chair of the House and Ways and Means Committee. He never gives interviews on television. He never talks about anything.
You'd think we would know the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee.
He represents, I think he represents Rachel, and she talks about him so admiringly because he's this salt of the earth guy. But, P.S., this is the guy, all right, New York State passes a law, you read about it this week. New York State passed a law that will give you Trump's tax returns from the state, which will include the federal returns.
Yes.
Richie Neal says, I don't want it. Now, Trump is already in court saying, you're not going to get it. He's suing about that.
Well, Alex Morse, the 30-year-old who's challenging him, says, we need urgent progress. And Richie is just not moving fast enough, and we need some young blood. Morse
is the first mayor to legalize marijuana. He won't take PAC money. He made the city, Holyoke, a sanctuary city.
Yes.
And he instituted needle exchange to fight the opioid epidemic and HIV.
Good for him.
This is innovation.
Yes.
He's not letting the grass grow under his feet. And these are the kind of people that we need in Congress who have an urgent sense of making change.
Well, that's why we're at a change moment when all these progressive Democrats are going to challenge the incumbents. And the Democratic Party is very freaked out about this. And instead, they ought to get on board and say, time for new blood.
Yes.
Richie Neal is 70. It's time for him to step aside. It's time for me to step aside. When will someone step up to replace me?
We have two, over the next 2 weeks, you'll be meeting some of Ann's guest co-hosts.
Yes, exactly.
With me.
And then I'll be back.
Okay.
All right. Not so good in the city of Racine, Wisconsin, where the city council... Oh, I'm sorry.
That's a good story.
Yes, it is. I was reading one down. Good story, Racine, Wisconsin. The city council has banned conversion therapy for minors. Very good.
They have to be under 18.
Yeah.
In Tennessee, they are now implementing this law that prevents ministers ordained online from solemnizing weddings. So those groups are suing in federal court. I mean, whatever happened to religious freedom, And Governor Bill Lee, who signed that law, by the way, a judge has already blocked that law. And Governor Bill Lee, who signed that law, also declared Nathan Bedford Forrest Day to honor the Civil War general and slave owner and the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. He declared a day for him. Even Ted Cruz objected to this bill.
You have to go pretty far to offend Ted Cruz. Dust up in Berkeley, California, where the city government has decided to neutralize gender in city codes. No longer will there be references to he or she. It'll all be them. It'll all be singular or plural them in all city codes. And there are people who are offended by this and others who are in favor.
Now, New Hampshire, which used to be a rock-ribbed Republican state and still has a lot of Republicans, you have a Republican governor, Sununu, who vetoed the bill passed by the Democrats to change desert designation on birth records more easily.
But
it would have allowed you to do it with a notarized statement from a healthcare provider. The governor said we've already got a reasonable process.
But New Hampshire has decided as of next year to offer non-binary gender markers, an X marker on driver's licenses to people who want that. Exactly.
Oh, by the way, last week we talked about the passing of John Paul Stevens, a great justice. He did vote with us on all the decisions of importance, but it was Harry Blackmun who wrote the dissent in Bowers v. Hardwick, which upheld the sodomy laws in 1986, not Stevens. Thank you to our viewer for the correction.
And in other Supreme Court news, the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, another one of these right-wing organizations, has now petitioned the Supreme Court for the right to discriminate against us in adoption decisions. This is basically revisiting the Philadelphia decision, where Philadelphia Philadelphia has a non-discrimination law, and so they said if you are an adoption agency getting support from the city, you cannot discriminate, including against LGBT people or same-sex couples who want to adopt. And a Catholic agency said, but we want to discriminate. And
we want your money to be able to do it.
Exactly.
And that is the outrage in this.
Well,
I mean, you're allowed,
yes.
They are perfectly, you go ahead and discriminate as much as you want, and you do.
So,
you don't let women get ordained, you don't let gay people get ordained. You can do that in your church with your own money.
So the city won at the local and state and federal courts, and then the Supreme Court refused to review the decision. They let it stand that the city could take money away from the Catholic agency. But now the Becket Fund is going back to the Supreme Court.
Because it's a new Supreme Court.
Well, of course. But they're also saying, they're citing the Obergefell decision and saying, well, you said there that, religions could do what they want in terms of marriage, so why can't they do what they want in terms of adoption?
They can. They just can't do it with our money.
Exactly. They're not getting the city money to perform those marriages.
Right.
So,
what makes any organization think they're entitled to state funds?
You've heard the phrase, a sense of entitlement?
Ooh. Well, in Waco, Texas, a daycare center, a Christian one, denied admission to a girl with lesbian moms, the Parkview Christian Academy. The couple said they want their kids to get a Christian education.
Oh my God, they went on and on.
The child has received many offers from other daycares.
They said we even read them Bible verses that are against same-sex marriage.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, we should all have an education about exactly what's in there.
Well, I don't think there are Bible verses against same-sex marriage.
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, what about Ruth and Naomi and David and Jonathan? That sounds kind of pro-gay to me.
Exactly. And pro-gay relationships.
In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill to protect Chick-fil-A from municipalities that don't want their bigoted business in their airports, and he then chowed down on some Chick-fil-A.
In Hillsborough, North Dakota, a gay man was in a bar. He went outside. He was attacked by a group of people who were mocking him, using anti-gay language. He was knocked unconscious, broken ankle, broken nose, damaged teeth, just a vicious, meaningless attack. But even worse, in North Charleston, South Carolina, trans woman Denali Berry Stuckey, 29 years old, shot dead, there's a picture of her.
The motives are still being investigated.
Lovely, but yet another black trans woman dead. That makes about a dozen this year that we know of.
Did we talk about Gavin Grimm?
No.
Gavin Grimm, is the transgender student, is back in federal court. Now, Gavin is not in high school anymore.
He's about 83 by now, isn't he?
Don't make me laugh. So he's still suing for the right of students to use facilities in accordance with their gender identity.
Right.
Now, here's the interesting thing about the case.
Yeah.
He now has a court-ordered birth certificate declaring that he's male, but the school is still arguing that that is a social construct, and they want to see genitalia. Basically, it's really, really awful. But they do refer in the court papers to Gavin as he. So.
He in the papers, she in the school bathroom.
It's just.
Why do people get so exercised about this?
Oh my God!
Why do people have to pass judgment on other people?
You have been. Come on. The women's movement. Women have only had the right to vote for 100 years.
It's true.
Not even.
Are we having a celebration for that?
I hope so.
All right. Well, and
Might
thank
be
you.
The last chance to use it.
Thank you to you could be right, the NAACP, which passed 3 resolutions at its annual conference.
Unanimously.
Supporting trans people and calling for an end to violence and discrimination against them. See, not everyone is against them. Calling for prevention and early detection of HIV infection, and calling for diversity training, sensitivity training around LGBT issues.
Okay. All right.
Should we talk about the people who died this week?
We should, and let's start with Richard Rhodes from Atlanta. I have to acknowledge that I didn't know his record, but he's died at the age of 81. He survived the witch hunt of 1956 to 65, which was called the Johns Committee, that targeted gay and lesbian people in the university system in Florida. Now, this wasn't just, it was professors, but it was also students. They wanted to root them out. Now, when a friend of his was arrested by Tampa police in 65, he fled for New York and did not tell his parents where he was for 5 years. This is what it was like before Stonewall, and is in some parts of the world. He's very active in DeKalb's Democratic Party, including as chair. He was the first out gay candidate for public office in Georgia in '88. Memorial is going to be held Saturday, August 3rd at 2 p.m. at the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. Dick Rhodes.
And I was fascinated to read about Joel Strack, who just died at age 59, who was an amazing activist in Orlando, Florida, including one of those involved in creating the gay days at Disney. He was also involved in the creation of the community center there.
This is a guy who worked for 3 decades for Walt Disney World, and then prompted the gay days.
Yes, which are still rogue at that facility.
Right.
They've now made them official in Paris, I think.
He was an early AIDS activist, helped create the first Pride Parade and the Orlando Gay Chorus and the Gay and Lesbian History Museum that they have there. Joel Strack, 59.
His catchphrase was, "Treat yourself right," which is words to live by for all of us.
And then there's a very famous writer and editor, George Hodgman, the age of 60, took his own life in this case. He's an out author and wrote the best-selling memoir recently called Bettyville, about moving to rural Missouri from New York to care for his aging mom, Betty, which is about to be made into a miniseries starring Shirley MacLaine. But he was an editor at Vanity Fair. He was a book editor.
And his memoir, Bettyville, talks about him growing up gay in rural Missouri and then going back to care for his mother.
60.
Very important people we're losing too often. All right. International news?
Yes.
All right.
Egypt.
Egypt, you want to start with Egypt?
Yes, we got the picture there.
Okay. Well, a trans woman, Malak al-Kashef, has been released from prison where she had been held for 4 months. While in prison, she was raped by a guard. She was protesting the government. That's why she was in prison. And there was an international campaign for her release. And finally, she is out.
Let's go to Russia. And the story I read first was this one, Oliver Stone, telling Putin, they did a sort of a joint interview, that Russia's anti-gay law, propaganda law, seems like maybe that's a sensible law. He put down trans people in this interview, to which Putin said, they live too well. They have nothing to think about. And Oliver goes, yeah, but it's not a healthy culture. And Putin said anti-gay laws protect minors. There are no restrictions at all after that, he has the nerve to say, except for like being rounded up in Chechnya, except for not being able to have a pride parade anywhere in the country, except not being able to demonstrate.
Having your film festivals busted up.
You know, lest we forget, Oliver Stone is essentially a virulent homophobe. He made that whole movie, JFK, was trying to pin the assassination on Clay Shaw, and they portrayed him, Tommy Lee Jones portrayed him as a decadent, effeminate gay man.
Well, let's blame Oliver Stone. I like Tommy Lee Jones.
Because then it leads to what happened in Russia this week.
Yes, which was in St. Petersburg, where they've been publishing a list of LGBT people on the internet, and with the admonition to go kill them. Well,
putting their addresses and their names up and their pictures up. Now, in fairness, there have been attempts to take this down, but it hasn't succeeded.
Well, this is Yelena Grigorieva, who was murdered. Her name was on the list. They came after her and they killed her.
Stabbed to death in St. Petersburg Sunday night. And, this website was inspired by the torture films like Saw. Now, she was active with the Alliance of Heterosexuals and LGBT for Equality. She was worried for her safety after she saw her name up there. And she appealed to law enforcement for help and was not given any.
Right. Well, because here's what the authorities are doing. Also in Russia, the government has discovered a gay male couple who adopted 2 boys in 2010 and have been raising them. One of the guys adopted the boys and is raising them with his partner. They're now teenagers. Well, the government now wants to take the boys away from these men and prosecute the workers who gave the boys to this guy.
But we don't do anything to people once they're not children anymore. What are you talking about?
That's right. There's no discrimination in Russia.
Let's stay in Eastern Europe.
It's a sensible law.
Let's stay in Eastern Europe and go to Poland. We got a bad story and a pretty good story. The far right in Poland is distributing stickers. We have a picture of them that say LGBT-free zone. It's a rainbow flag with an X through it. And now this,
one of those circles.
I will say that the centrist mayor of Warsaw said he'd file a complaint with the prosecutor's office over this. The government is contemplating a Russia-style gay propaganda ban, a la Putin. Our U.S. ambassador.
Well, this is my favorite part of the story.
Georgette Mosbacher.
Yes. Well, Georgette Mosbacher is condemning these stickers on our behalf because, of course, the U.S. government. Yeah.
It's against diversity and tolerance.
Well, it's also against her stepdaughter, Dee Mosbacher, the filmmaker, who didn't always have a great relationship with her, but evidently Georgette has come around, probably at the urging of our president, to condemn.
We're being facetious.
Condemn homophobic gestures like that. But meanwhile, also in Poland, they had their first Pride Parade in Białystok.
Yes, you may know Białystok is the name of Max in
Max Białystok, yes. Białystok and Bloom in the producers.
Yes.
But Białystok, Poland is a place, and 1,000 Pride marchers showed up for this parade. But thousands and thousands of right-wing protesters showed up and started throwing flash bombs, rocks, bottles.
25 were arrested.
Yep.
But the Interior Minister said officials ensure security regardless of the ideas, values, and beliefs proclaimed by the citizens.
There are the cops going after the protesters.
That is encouraging. That's the standard that we want.
Yeah, but you see, the cops were using tear gas to drive away the protesters and then ended up arresting 25 of them. But this kind of thing is still going on all over the world, and that's why we encourage people to stay tuned in to the movement.
And God knows what's going to happen in Britain with Boris Johnson. Now, he's Trumpian in many ways, but he did vote to repeal Section 28 and 2003, and he introduced civil partnerships. He backed same-sex marriage. He engaged in a lot of homophobia in his columns when he used to be a writer, and it was not beneath him to make homophobic attacks. But and he opposed dealing with school issues around LGBT issues.
And he'll only get reinforcement from Trump. But meanwhile, the House of Lords in Britain did agree to the same thing that the Parliament had passed before, which is that Northern Ireland will have legal same-sex marriage if they don't reinstitute a government by October 21st. So same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland could start as early as January 12th if all that goes as planned.
We told you that the Israeli education minister, Rabbi Rafi Peretz, had said that not only was he for conversion therapy, but he knows how to do it. So now he is saying he vehemently opposes it. Bibi Netanyahu got on his back on this, and he's sorry for saying that intermarriage of Jews and Christians is the second Holocaust.
Well, that just shows...
He called that comment misplaced.
Well, this is how desperate Netanyahu is to get reelected, and God knows what he has given this guy to get him to say
the
this.
The education ministry.
Well, beyond that, I'm sure, to get him to sign on to changing his mind. In Dominica, in the Caribbean, an anonymous gay man who will not let himself be identified yet has sued the government to get rid of the sodomy law. There's a lot of bravery in these Caribbean nations going after these British colonial laws. And so this is another guy stepping forward to try to make change in that area. It's great.
Well, they were trying to make some change in Malta, which is not which is a fairly welcoming place, but they produced LGBTIQ welcome stickers.
All welcome.
But they've been put on hold after a public backlash. And some people are saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want labels on people. Isn't that what we're trying to get away from?
We don't need this. Why would we do that?
No, it's because we need to get through this stage, and then there will be no more Gay USA show.
Yeah. Pray for that.
It'll be
in South Korea.
Gay Russia.
They're very subtle in South Korea. A bunch of students at Presbyterian University decided to celebrate the International Day Against Homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia.
And we are not blocking out their faces. This is the picture that we got from the news.
But you will notice they are subtly wearing shirts in the various colors of the rainbow and holding up a rainbow flag. Well, that was not okay with their Presbyterian University, but they were punished for this. But they went to court, and the court has ruled that the students should not be punished for doing this, and that they had the right to very quietly and peacefully protest on that day.
They're going to get legal fees, too. And one student said, I hope this sentence will be a comfort to those who have been hurt and excommunicated by the Korean church producing hatred.
We've told you about the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which has ruled that Central and South American countries must legalize same-sex marriage.
Are they finally going to do it?
And one by one, tiptoeing in, and Ecuador was one that has agreed to this. And,
well, they're the first to implement it.
Well, and there is the first lesbian couple to get married, the first same-sex couple to marry, Michelle and Alexandra, showing off their marriage certificate in Ecuador. Congratulations to them.
There are other Latinx countries that did this on their own, of course, prior to this.
And a lesbian couple in Serbia are suing for civil partnership rights. You'd think they might have them, since Ana Brnabić is a lesbian who's the prime minister or something?
Yep, she is.
Nonetheless, that they don't have those civil partnership laws yet, so a lesbian couple is suing for those rights.
Are you sitting down?
Yes, I am.
St. Bridget's National School in County Wicklow is introducing
Ireland.
gender-neutral uniforms and restrooms for the gender non-conforming. And the principal said, if that means girls wearing trousers or boys wearing skirts, so be it. So this is Ireland.
It wasn't that
Catholic
easy.
School.
Wasn't that easy?
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Treat people like people.
And congratulations to Taiga Ishikawa, 45 years old, first out gay man elected to the upper house of parliament in Japan.
He's a campaigner for same-sex marriage, and he says, this acknowledges that we are here.
And he's predicting marriage will be legalized in Japan in the next few years. There is a lesbian in the lower house who was elected there who has also been campaigning for marriage rights.
Okay. AIDS news?
Yes, please.
Well, UNAIDS is now warning the pace of progress of combating the global pandemic is receding due to a lack of political will in many countries. 23 million are now receiving the antiretroviral treatments, but there are 15 million people with HIV who are not. 54% of the new infections are among sex workers, drug users, MSMs, men who have sex with men, transgender, and prisoners. UNAIDS is $7 billion short of the $26 billion needed by 2020 to keep up this fight.
And shouldn't be a headline because we've heard this over and over again, but a new study from Zambia and South Africa of 1 million people has shown once again that universal testing and early treatment reduces new infections. We have been begging for 30 years for there to be universal testing, for it to be routine in every doctor's visit, in every interaction with any health care. And people just will not institute it, and it could make such a difference in reducing new infections.
Well, there's progress at the CDC on their website. They finally updated its page on risk levels of getting HIV by saying, if you have an undetectable viral load, it is considered 100% protective of your ability to transmit HIV, and PrEP use among gay and bisexual men is 99% effective.
And they're still trying to make progress on making prevention easier. The news this week was about the potential for an implantable rod, like the contraceptive Norvir that they would implant in your arm, I guess, and would be effective for a year. And they're doing it with some new drug that is more powerful and therefore they think can be made to last over a length of time. It's not available yet, but that's just something they're working on.
And we still urge you to use condom protection to avoid all those other STIs that are now proliferating.
Absolutely. I was very sad to hear that Diana Bookman in Charleston, South Carolina, has gotten a brain injury during surgery and is not in good shape. She was the star of the fabulous documentary years ago, Diana's Hair Ego, which was made by Ellen Spiro, wonderful filmmaker. It's all about how she decided in her hair salon in Charleston to start doing AIDS education, handing out condoms, doing classes, educating everyone who came in and all of the surrounding area. And she's a hero for all the work she's done. She's still doing this work.
She just started this in her hair salon, but she ended up founding the South Carolina AIDS Education Network.
Yes.
She really got involved. If you get our email, if you sign up for our emails, go to our website, www.gayusatv.org. You will see more information about Deanna.
And you can see the film Diana's Hair Ego online on Vimeo, I think. Maybe we can put a link to that on the site too.
I'll try.
All right. Speaking of films, on to entertainment news.
Yes.
Well, I saw something really cool last week.
Yes.
A new Kathy Griffin documentary, all about first the horror of what happened to her career when she went after Trump with that mask with the ketchup on it, and then segueing into her act, which explains all that too. And it's terrific. I've always liked Kathy Griffin, but sometimes she's just not quite good enough. Yeah. But now that she's politicized, she is so sharp and so angry.
What does she have to say about Anderson?
She's very angry at Anderson and at Andy Cohen, both of whom screwed her and rejected her after the Trump stuff, as did Ellen DeGeneres, who said, never again on my show, I can't talk to you. Terrible stuff. And who else? Anderson, Ellen, Al Franken said she had been doing fundraisers for Al Franken, and he said, well, I can't be seen with you.
Who stood by her?
Me and a lot of other people, but the documentary, which I assume will be released soon, is Kathy Griffin, A Hell of a Story. So this was a part of a new little film festival that Tina Brown had put together for her Women of the World thing. And so Tina interviewed Kathy after the screening. There they were. Tina Brown is an idiot.
She ruined the New Yorker.
Well, I don't know about that. I still like the New Yorker through all that, but she was terrible. And even Kathy Griffin says to her at one point, will you please cut the crap? She could not ask an interesting question. She was just set on her own, and she's reading cards.
You don't
she was
seem
terrible.
You don't seem too concerned about making friends in high places.
No, I've given up on Tina Brown.
Well, I had never heard of Gigi Gorgeous. I acknowledge that, but this is a trans YouTube personality. And Gigi got married in Montecito, California to Nats Getty, who's a model, designer, and oil heiress. They fell in love only in February 2016. Gigi has documented her transition on YouTube. Governor Newsom attended the wedding.
There they are.
Governor Newsom is Nat's godfather. They're very active in GLAAD, the LA Center, and the Ariadne Getty Foundation. I'm
more interested in the updates on the reboot of the L Word. Now they're calling what they're going to do a sequel rather than the revisit.
Okay.
And I think they're renaming it Generation Q. They're going to do 8 episodes on Showtime this fall, I think. They are having 3 of the major characters come back, Jennifer Beals, Catherine Manning, Leisha Haley, and a lot of new young people, which worries me, because I like the old people. But we'll keep you up to date on this.
But we want young people on the show.
We do, but I am confused about whether it's still the L Word or now Generation Q. I suspect it's been renamed Generation Q.
All right, big news in the comic book movie world. In the 4th Thor movie, Thor, Love and Thunder, Tessa Thompson's character, Valkyrie, who is king of Asgard, needs to find her queen, so her bisexuality will be addressed in the movie series, as it had not been.
As it has been in real life in her relationship with Janelle Monáe.
Right. And Marvel's The Eternals also has a casting call for a gay hero.
Well, we know many people who could fit that bill.
Okay.
But I'm not sure they'd be appealing to Marvel.
The Kennedy Center honors were announced. I mean, they run those at Yuletide, and they're going to be among those. They're going to be on. Besides Sesame Street, they're honoring PFLAG mom Sally Field. She has a gay son. She talks about that all the time. And out gay conductor Michael Tilson Thomas of the San Francisco Symphony. Look at him in
It took
action.
him a while to come out
Did it?
in life. Oh, yeah. He was a sort of late bloomer. But he is out now, and that's a great thing. And it's great that he's getting this honor. The other honorees are Linda Ronstadt, who, I've adored for years, and Sesame Street, as you said, and Earth, Wind, and Fire. So it should be a good performance, but I really hope the president does not show up. He has a perfect track record of not coming to this.
Well, I mean, I don't think those kind of folks could get through it without making some sort of comment, and probably will.
I don't know. You know how people clam up when the person's in the room.
It's, we're in the midst of this. We're in the midst of a crisis in this country. I don't think people are taking it seriously enough. I mean, I think people are hurting over it, and I feel awful about it. But I don't think people are taking it seriously enough, like the people of Puerto Rico, and
I'd love to think they would speak up. I'd love to think they'd speak up whether he's there or not. But I just have heard too many people say things like Ellen DeGeneres and Al Franken and Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen about Kathy Griffin. Oh, you know what? They caught Andy Cohen on camera in this documentary. He's walking along, and some camera crew comes along and says, "So, what do you think about Kathy Griffin and Trump?" And he says, "Who?" And they say, "Yeah, Kathy Griffin."
He doesn't talk about Trump. He won't talk about it.
He makes occasional little political comments, but not to the extent of standing up for someone who.
Even Anderson Cooper speaks out about that once in a while.
About Kathy Griffin?
Trump.
Oh, but they threw her off the New Year's show and replaced her with Andy Cohen, and they have just thrown her overboard. It's terrible.
New Year's hasn't been the same.
So I would like people to speak up at the Kennedy Center honors, but they tend to say things like, "Well, that's impolite. It's ungracious." I wouldn't say anything in that setting.
They have no problem at the Tony Awards or the Oscars. People speaking up about what's going on in the country. It doesn't have to be Michael Moore.
More. I want more.
Well, again, what is it going to take to get? I looked at what happened in Hong Kong and in Puerto Rico.
All the protests in Hong Kong.
And the protests.
Yeah.
If you really want to change things, folks, you have to get out in the streets and you have to stay there. I mean, we all had this great feeling during the women's marches of being surrounded by essentially millions of people around the world who did this all at once. But it has to be sustained to stop it. And then people get the idea, okay, the election's coming up, we can take care of it. But we have such a bad system in this country, whether it's the Electoral College or the Senate. These are hard things to win. It's not hard to win an election. It's not hard to get a majority in this country for the right thing or for the good thing. But it is hard with that kind of a system. If we don't get new systems, we're not going anywhere.
And I'm not willing to concede that it's so easy to win, especially with the Electoral College system.
That's what I'm saying.
But who are we putting in office? People who are, we weren't thinking that Obama was a hero for a lot of the stuff he did, and certainly not Bill Clinton. So who are we going to elect now who's going to have the guts to do more?
It all requires a much more engaged electorate that, democracy is not a spectator sport. You've got to,
I learned many decades ago, watching the civil rights movement on TV, participating in anti-Vietnam War demonstrations, watching millions of people coming to Washington and coming out in the streets.
Not to mention ACT UP. Not to mention.
I'm getting there.
Oh, all right. What year are we at?
we have time.
A few minutes.
We do. So you're getting the whole story. So, I've seen the progression over decades that you must bring people into the streets to demand change.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do. Well, ACT UP was not a mass movement. It was more a targeted ZAP movement. But with Reclaim Pride, what we did by bringing 45,000 people into the street a few weeks ago in a protest march, and planting the seed of that happening all over the world. And that is an attempt to get back to mass movements in the street that protest and that have values and that have an agenda.
I mean, given all that's going on, what is even the point of having a celebratory parade while everything is being taken away from us?
One wonders. And when that celebration, that parade is all about marching behind corporate floats, one really has to wonder what the point is.
And people need to be, it's hard watching this show sometimes, I realize, because we try to tell you the truth. But with this Supreme Court...
Maybe people should invent a drinking game for this show.
I remember going up to Jim Obergefell a couple of years ago, and I said, "Aren't you worried with what's happening? That
No, he's happy."
He said, "My lawyer said they don't usually take things away that they've given you." No,
please wake up, Jim.
We depended on the fact that the court would say Bowers v. Hardwick was a terrible decision in 1986,
we won.
and they overturned it 17 years later. So marriage can be reversed, and there's a majority for it.
Any of this can be reversed. I'm waiting for when they reverse Brown v. Board of Education.
Sure.
They could reverse anything because there is no, they talk in such solemn terms about precedent. But the fact is there's no rule that keeps precedent in place. They can do anything they want.
Well, the lower federal courts are bound by what the Supreme Court says.
We're not talking about the lower federal courts. No, I'm just saying.
So you will see all kinds of decisions affirmed for a long time until it gets back to the Supreme Court, and then they can do whatever they want.
Boom, we're gone.
So have a nice week.
But our point is that we need mass movements in the streets to affect change that we want. And here's the real secret. It's great work. You meet the best people. You have a good time. You go out to dinner. You enjoy yourselves in the streets, and you get to express yourself, whether you're angry or celebrating or whatever. The streets are the place to make all this happen.
You don't have to get arrested.
No, you don't.
But you can, and
Yes,
you might find that very empowering as well.
Look, I got arrested about 20 times. I don't do it
20 times?
Yes, but I got convicted on 4 counts, and so now after that, when I got arrested, they wanted to really throw the book at me, and I was not down for that. But I know people have been arrested much more than me, and they're fine.
Bye.
And we will see you next week.